to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where the day can soften at the edges and your thoughts can drift like feathers on a quiet breeze. Tonight's gentle journey will carry you to a wooden swing hanging over a sea of clover, where small wonders unfold in the hush of evening. Settle in now just as you are. Let your body find the most comfortable shape it can, as if you're being arranged by kindness. Feel the support beneath you, steady and patient, holding you without asking anything in return. Allow your jaw to loosen, your shoulders to melt down and away from your ears, your hands to rest with nothing to grip and nowhere to go. Take a slow breath in as though you're sipping warm air and let it go long and easy like a curtain falling into place. Another soft breath in and out. With every exhale, imagine the weight of the day sliding off you. Not all at once, but little by little, like sand slipping through open fingers. Picture a calm landscape forming at the back of your mind, as gentle as a watercolor wash. The light is low and velvety, as if the sun has tucked itself behind distant hills and left a lingering glow. The air feels clean with a hint of green sweetness. Somewhere far away, a night bird makes a single rounded call, and then the world listens again. As you breathe, let the scene become slightly clearer, though it never needs to be sharp. Soft is good. Blurry is safe. Dreamlike is perfect. And now, without effort, you begin to notice that the story is already waiting for you, like a lamp lit in a window. In a meadow that seemed to have been stitched together from twilight and calm, a wooden swing hung from the thick limb of an old tree. The tree stood at the meadow's edge where forest shadows gathered, though the meadow itself held onto the last of the evening's pale gold. Beneath the swing, clover spread in a wide, tender patch, its leaves layered like small green hearts, and its blossoms clustered in pale puffs, creamy white and faint pink, like little lanterns made for bees. The swing was simple, the way simple things often feel most true. 2 ropes, worn soft by weather and time, and a smooth wooden seat shaped by hands long ago. The wood had darkened with years, and the grain ran in gentle lines like the rings of a calm river. When the breeze moved through, the swing answered with the tiniest creak, not loud enough to be a sound you'd notice right away, but present enough to feel like the meadow was breathing. The clover below was thick and plush, cushioning the ground so completely that it seemed to muffle footsteps, turning movement into quiet. If someone were to walk there, the leaves would spring back behind them, as if the meadow liked to keep its secrets neat. And there were secrets, though they weren't the kind that demanded solving. They were the soothing kind. Mysteries that wrapped around the heart and told it, gently to slow down. As evening deepened, a faint mist began to gather at the meadow's lowest places. It didn't rise like fog that wants to swallow the world. It simply rested, a soft layer like a wool blanket spread across the clover. Tiny dew pearls formed on leaves and blossoms, catching the remaining light so the ground seemed sprinkled with quiet stars. On the far side of the meadow, a narrow path curved between tall grasses and wild flowers. It was not a path that felt urgent. It did not lead to a city or a market or any place where time was kept like a strict rule. It led instead to the tree, the swing, and the clover. A place that felt like an exhale. Along that path came a traveler, moving at the unhurried pace of someone who had nowhere else they needed to be. The traveler was not young in any particular way, nor old in any particular way. They were simply a person shaped by gentle days and patient nights, wearing a cloak that had traveled with them through seasons. Their boots were scuffed, but not in a weary way, more in a well-loved way, as if those boots had learned the language of many trails. The traveler paused where the meadow opened, taking in the way the grasses swayed in slow waves. Their breath seemed to match the rhythm of the place, and their eyes softened with that quiet recognition that sometimes arrives without explanation. The sense of having returned, even if one has never been here before. They stepped forward, and the clover welcomed their boots with a soundless spring. The air smelled of damp earth, crushed green leaves, and the faint sweetness of blossoms. A night breeze slid past, cool but not cold, and the traveler pulled their cloak slightly closer, not out of need, but as if to savor the coziness of it. The old tree that held the swing was an elm, wide at the base, its bark ridged and textured like the pages of an ancient book. Its leaves were dense and dark, and they whispered to one another overhead. The traveler approached with an instinctive respect, as if greeting a wise elder. For a moment they stood still beneath the branches. The swing hung over the clover like an invitation that had been waiting for just the right person. The ropes were steady, the seat motionless, yet it felt alive, in the way quiet objects sometimes do, alive with memory. The traveler reached out and touched the wooden seat with the tips of their fingers. The wood was cool and smooth, and it held the faintest trace of warmth, as though it remembered sunlight. A slow calm settled through the traveler's shoulders, easing down their arms and into their hands. They exhaled, long and content. They sat carefully, as if sitting on a promise. The ropes tightened slightly, the swing dipped, and the clover beneath brushed the traveler's boots. When they pushed gently with their feet, the swing began to move, back and forward. The motion was small at first, barely more than a sway. The creak of the ropes was soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby played by an instrument that had forgotten how to be loud. The traveler's cloak draped around them, and their hands rested lightly on the ropes, not gripping, just steadying. As the swing moved, the meadow seemed to respond. The grasses leaned and lifted as if Bowing in slow courtesy, the mist below shifted, curling in lazy patterns. Somewhere in the clover, a small cricket began a low song. Back and forward, the traveler's gaze drifted out across the meadow, and their thoughts, which had once been busy, began to lengthen like shadows at dusk. Each swing forward carried them toward the gentle unknown. Each swing back returned them to quiet safety. It was a perfect balance, a rocking of the world. In that steady motion, something subtle happened. The air, already soft, became softer still, as if the meadow had decided to draw the traveler into its dream. The edges of things blurred just a little. The wildflowers, the distant tree line, even the sky. The stars began to appear, one by one, like careful wishes. The traveler's eyes grew heavy, though they were not yet ready to sleep. There was something here to notice first, something tender and strange. A clover blossom just below the swing glowed. It wasn't a bright glow like a lantern or a torch. It was a quiet radiance, the way a pearl gleams when it catches moonlight. The traveler leaned forward slightly, letting the swing's motion slow. The blossom's glow pulsed gently in time with the traveler's breath, as if it had been listening. When the traveler's boot brushed the clover, the glowing blossom brightened for an instant, then steadied. The traveler's lips parted in a small smile. It felt less like surprise and more like remembrance. They let the swing come to a near stop, and then they stood, stepping carefully into the clover patch. The clover was thick, soft, and damp with dew. It rose against their ankles and calves, and the blossoms bobbed like tiny heads, turning to watch. In the center of the clover patch, the glowing blossom waited. The traveler crouched and held their hand above it, not touching. Warmth rose from the bloom, a gentle heat like the memory of sun on skin. A hush settled over everything, as if the meadow held its breath. Then very softly the blossom opened wider than any clover should, its petals unfolding like a secret kept too long. Inside was not pollen, not the usual velvet center. Inside was a tiny pool of light, swirling with pale green and silver, like moonlight caught in water. The traveler watched, spellbound in the most peaceful way. The light did not demand attention. It simply offered itself like a quiet gift. A small breeze passed, and the pool of light rippled. From within it rose the faint outline of something, a thread, a strand, a ribbon of shimmering air. It floated upward, curling gently around the traveler's fingers, not wrapping tightly, not pulling, just touching like a greeting. The traveler's hand tingled warm and calm. Their heartbeat slowed, their shoulders loosened. The ribbon of shimmering air drifted away from the traveler's hand and floated toward the swing, settling around the ropes. The ropes began to glow softly too, not all at once, but in small sections, as if light were traveling along them like a slow firefly. The traveler stood again, and the clover rustled, sounding almost like whispered laughter. The swing, now faintly lit, moved slightly on its own, swaying as if it were beckoning. With slow care, the traveler returned to the seat and sat down. The ropes felt warmer now, alive beneath their palms. The wooden seat was no longer cool. It held a gentle heat like a hearthstone that remembers flames. Back and forward. The swing moved without effort, as if it knew the rhythm the traveler needed. The glowing clover below seemed to spread, one blossom, then another, until a small constellation of soft lights dotted the clover patch. The meadow became a place painted with quiet magic, not loud or sparkling, but tender and steady. As the traveler swung, the lights below drifted upward in tiny motes like floating seeds. They rose around the traveler, brushing their cheeks, their cloak, their hands. Each mote carried something, a scent, a feeling, a softened memory. The traveler inhaled, and one mote tasted of fresh bread. Another tasted of rain on warm stone. Another tasted of a childhood afternoon when time had felt endless. The traveler's eyes closed briefly, and their face relaxed as though a gentle hand had smoothed it. The swing's arc widened slightly, not high, not thrilling, just enough to feel the world rocking in calm. The traveler's boots skimmed the tops of clover blossoms, and the blossoms glowed brighter where they were touched, as if the meadow enjoyed being noticed. Beyond the meadow, the forest watched with quiet patience. Tall trunks stood like pillars in a moonlit hall. Leaves shimmered, and somewhere deeper in, an owl turned its head and blinked slowly. Everything seemed to move in slowed time, as if night itself were a thick velvet curtain lowering gradually. The traveler opened their eyes again, and the meadow looked different. Not changed in shape, but softened in meaning. The grasses seemed more luminous. The sky seemed closer. The stars seemed like they were leaning in to listen. On the far edge of the clover patch, a small stone appeared where there had been none before. It was round and pale, with a faint spiral etched into its surface. The traveler noticed it as the swing passed forward, the motion drawing their gaze. They slowed the swing with their feet and stood once more, stepping toward the stone. The clover parted around it as if making room. When the traveler reached down, their fingers brushed the spiral, and the stone warmed instantly. A quiet hum rose, so soft it was more a feeling than a sound. The spiral on the stone began to glow, the same gentle green silver as the clover blossom. The traveler held the stone in their palm. It was smooth, fitting perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. As they looked down at it, the spiral seemed to deepen, and the hum grew slightly clearer. It felt like a song without words, a lullaby sung by wind through reeds, a melody that promised, without explaining, that all was well. The traveler's eyelids grew heavier again. They returned to the swing and sat, letting the stone rest in their lap. The ropes glowed softly beside them. The clover below shimmered with quiet lights. Back and forward. With each pass, the stone in the traveler's lap pulsed gently, as if keeping time. The motes of light continued to rise, drifting around the traveler like slow snow. The meadow's mist curled in gentle spirals, mirroring the etched pattern on the stone. As the traveler swung, the air began to fill with faint images, not sharp, not demanding attention, but delicate as reflections on water. There was a cottage with warm windows and smoke curling from a chimney. There was a shallow stream where water murmured over smooth rocks. There was a lantern hanging by a door, swaying gently. There was a basket of apples on a wooden table, their skins gleaming. The traveler did not try to grasp these images. They simply let them float, the way one might watch clouds drift past. The images rose and faded with the swing's rhythm, appearing when the traveler moved forward, dissolving when the traveler moved back and forward. The cottage image lingered a little longer this time. It appeared at the meadow's edge, just beyond the old elm nestled where the forest began. The traveler blinked, and it remained. The warm windows glowed steadily. The lantern by the door swung in the breeze, casting a small circle of light. The traveler's heart stirred with gentle curiosity, but no urgency. They slowed the swing until it came to a stop, then stood and stepped through the clover toward the cottage. The clover lights guided the way, glowing brighter along a faint path that had not been visible before. The traveler followed, their boots brushing dew-laden leaves, their cloak trailing softly behind them. As they approached, the cottage seemed less like an illusion and more like a place that had always existed, simply waiting to be noticed. Its walls were made of weathered wood, its roof covered with thick moss that gleamed faintly under moonlight. A small garden surrounded it, filled with herbs and night-blooming flowers, whose petals shone pale in the dark. The air near the cottage smelled of chamomile, lavender, and something warm like honey. The traveler paused at the door. The lantern's light made the wood glow golden. Carved into the door frame very faintly was the same spiral that marked the stone in the traveler's lap. They lifted a hand and knocked, softly, twice, as if not wanting to wake anyone who might be dreaming. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a single room, cozy and small, lit by a fireplace whose flames burned low and steady. A kettle sat on a hook above the embers, and the scent of warm herbs filled the air. Shelves lined the walls, holding jars of dried flowers, bundles of twine, smooth stones, and small wooden carvings. A thick rug covered the floor, and a chair sat near the fire, draped with a knitted blanket. The room felt like safety made tangible. No one stood there to greet the traveler, and yet the traveler did not feel alone. The cottage itself seemed welcoming, as if it had opened its door because it recognized the traveler's tiredness. The traveler stepped inside, and the door closed behind them with a gentle click. The warmth of the room wrapped around them, easing the cool night from their cloak. They moved slowly, taking in the quiet beauty of the space. On a small table near the fire sat a cup already poured, steam curling upward in delicate threads. The traveler approached and breathed in. The tea smelled of chamomile and mint with a hint of sweet clover. They lifted the cup carefully. It was warm but not too hot. They sipped, and the taste spread through them like calm water. Their chest loosened, their breathing slowed even more. The traveler sat in the chair by the fire, the blanket automatically settling around their shoulders, as if guided by invisible hands. The stone with the spiral lay warm in their lap. The fire crackled softly, not loud enough to startle, just enough to remind the room it was alive. Outside, through the cottage window, the meadow could still be seen. The wooden swing hung beneath the elm tree, faintly glowing, swaying just a little in the breeze. The clover patch shimmered like a gentle galaxy. The traveler watched, eyelids half lowered. The cottage was so quiet that even thoughts seemed to tiptoe. The tea's warmth spread through their limbs. The blanket's weight was comforting, like a kind hand resting on the shoulders. On the mantel above the fire sat a small wooden box. It was carved with clover leaves and spirals, its surface polished smooth. The traveler noticed it without feeling the need to reach for it. It simply belonged there, like a note set aside for the right moment. The traveler's gaze drifted again to the meadow. The swing's ropes glowed softly, and the clover lights rose like slow fireflies, drifting upward into the night. The traveler's breathing matched the fire's rhythm. Inhale, exhale, gentle and steady. In that warm stillness, the traveler's mind began to wander, not into busy thoughts, but into softer spaces. The images that had floated in the meadow returned here too, faintly reflected in the cottage window. A river, a lantern, a table with apples, a path through tall grasses. Each image seemed to carry a quiet reassurance, a reminder of simple comforts, a whisper that the world could be kind. The traveler's hand rested on the spiral stone, thumb tracing the etched curve. With each slow circle, the stone hummed faintly, and the firelight shimmered as if responding. The traveler's eyelids drooped further. And then, very gently, the traveler felt a pull, not a tug or a demand, but a soft invitation like the swing had offered before. It came from outside, from the meadow, from the elm tree. The traveler stood slowly, cup now empty, blanket sliding from their shoulders. They set the cup back on the table and moved toward the door, drawn by that quiet call. The cottage seemed to understand, offering no resistance. The traveler stepped back into the night. The air outside was cool and fresh again, but now it felt even softer, as if the cottage's warmth had changed the way the traveler experienced the world. The meadow shimmered with dew and clover light. The swing waited beneath the elm, glowing faintly. The traveler walked through the clover, guided by the gentle lights, and sat once more on the wooden seat. The stone rested in their palm now, warm and humming, like a small heart. Back and forward. The swing began to move with ease, and the traveler's body followed the rhythm, loose and relaxed. Above, the elm leaves whispered. Around, the mist curled. below, the clover glowed. The traveler looked up at the sky. Stars spread, wide, steady, and calm. The moon hung low, not bright and sharp, but softly luminous, like a pearl behind thin cloth. The traveler felt very small in the best way, small enough that worries could not cling. As the swing moved, the traveler's thoughts grew slower still. The day's edges dissolved, the traveler's eyes half closed, opening only briefly to catch the shimmer of clover lights rising, then closing again to rest. The meadow seemed to rock with the swing. The forest beyond swayed gently. Even the stars felt as though they were breathing in time. Back and forward. The traveler's grip on the rope loosened until their hands simply rested there, palms open, their shoulders sank, their jaw softened, their breath deepened into a slow, steady tide. The spiral stone's hum faded. Not because it disappeared, but because it blended into everything else. The whispering leaves, the distant cricket song, the soft creak of rope. It became part of the lullaby of the night. In the clover below, the lights began to dim one by one, like candles being gently pinched out, until only a few remained, faint as embers. The mist settled lower, smoothing itself across the meadow like a sheet. The swing's motion slowed, each arc shorter than the last. Back and forward. The traveler's head tipped slightly, chin drifting toward chest. Their eyelids closed fully now, and their face held a quiet peace, as if the meadow had soothed every tight place inside them. The elm tree, old and steady, held the ropes with patient strength. The wooden seat cradled the traveler like a gentle hand. The clover below cushioned the earth, soft and forgiving. A breeze moved through once more, cool and tender, carrying the scent of clover blossoms and distant forest moss. The traveler inhaled, slow and deep, and exhaled even more slowly. Back and forward. The swing nearly stilled. In the quiet, the meadow felt like a dream that was learning to become sleep. The stars remained bright, but they no longer asked to be watched. The sounds of night softened further, as if everything had agreed to whisper. The traveler's breathing was the clearest rhythm now. In, out, steady and calm. The few remaining clover lights dimmed until they were barely there, like the last glow of a fire at the end of a long evening. The mist smoothed out completely, and the meadow became a gentle, drowsy sea. The swing stopped. The traveler sat perfectly still, supported by rope and wood, held by night and clover and the kind patience of the old elm. Their hands still held the spiral stone, but even that seemed to rest, its warmth quiet, its hum now only a memory. The world settled around them, snug and unhurried. And as the meadow grew quieter, as the sky grew deeper, sleep arrived like a soft blanket being drawn up. Slowly, gently, without interruption, everything was safe. Everything was calm. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.